The Chicago Bears training camp is only 1 day away, and on today's episode, I want to talk about a few players that need a strong training camp to prove where they're going to be at for the Chicago Bears next season, and then we're going to talk about one question at each position for the Bears offense heading into training camp. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. We're going to talk about players that have to have a strong training camp for us to feel confident in where the Bears are going to be able to go next season and hopefully be able to go above what their expectations are. And the number one, I said every time we have a list like this, it's going to start with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is somebody who's coming into his second season, the second training camp overall. We know the pressure that's there on Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson for that matter. There are so many Bears fans, there are so many people around the world, around the NFL that are ready to call Caleb Williams a bust, that are ready to say that Caleb Williams cannot be a productive quarterback or cannot be a franchise quarterback in this league. And it's up to him. It's up to him to prove it. And what this team has done as far as bringing in one of the brightest offensive minds in the game in Ben Johnson, another one in Declan Doyle, as well as the offensive coordinator, as well as the weapons that they've stacked this deck for Caleb Williams to be able to use, you're damn right the expectations around Caleb Williams are high. Whether you're somebody that's rooting for him to fail or somebody who's just rooting for the quarterback that's wearing your team's jersey, whatever it is, you should want Caleb Williams to do right. The people who want to see Caleb Williams fail just so they can say they're right about something, they're weirdos. It is what it is. Don't worry about them. But Caleb has legitimate questions around him, and it's up to him to answer that. When you look at the overhaul of the offensive line, when you look at the adding weapons like Colston Loveland and Luther Burden, what they can be to already Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, and DJ Moore, right? All those things matter. And so, Caleb Williams' rookie season wasn't terrible at all. Now, the Bears didn't win a lot, and he had his normal rookie ups and downs, which I told you guys was going to be coming regardless as those normal rookie up and downs were going to be there. But he had one of the best seasons as a Bear quarterback. Not just a Bears rookie quarterback, but a Bears quarterback. The problem is saying that you've had one of the best Bears quarterback seasons really doesn't mean shit. It just doesn't. That's how the Bears quarterback situation has been over its history. So Caleb Williams, though, has a lot in front of him that he's going to have to figure out, a lot that he's going to have to show, and a strong training camp is important for him. It's also important for the player that we drafted with him in Rome Odunze, right? When you look at it, Rome wasn't even the second best rookie wide receiver in 2024. He just wasn't, right? Now, while Matt Eberflus and the former coaching staff that was in flux all last season, he didn't have a great season. Our offense stagnated for the majority of last season, but make no mistake about it, Rome Odunze has a huge number of expectations around him, and for nothing else, the class that he was drafted in, that wide receiver class, two of those guys have already shown themselves to be what many people are looking at as franchise wideouts. Rome has to take a step up, and it seems like he's ready. How he's added to his body to get ready for the rigors and wanting to do more physical things next season. But Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze and their development goes hand in hand together. You're going to have a strong training camp, a strong preseason, and they're going to have to really together, Caleb and Rome are going to have to set the tone of the expectations that are going to be there for him in their sophomore seasons, and we'll see if we can do that. Much like I said with Caleb, having Ben Johnson, having Declan Doyle, having creative offensive minds should be able to schematically give them what they need on top of an offensive line and better weapons overall. It should be, like I said, schematically enough to give them the leg up and to have a platform to jump off of in their second seasons. The question is how are they going to come in and attack it? That's the thing. This is going to be a big training camp and preseason for Rome Odunze. How much he learns that playbook, how much he becomes an impact contributor on this Bears team next season. And I want to be clear, I'm not in any way saying that Rome Odunze had a terrible rookie year. He did not. He actually had a pretty solid rookie year himself. but how much he comes into that is going to be hugely important in the second year for Rome Odunze. Him and Caleb are intertwined. They're going to be intertwined for the majority of their careers because that's why we drafted them together, both in the first round. We wanted to have the wide out that Caleb Williams was going to be able to grow and develop with, and vice versa. And so now, every time we bring up one of them, it's going to be hand in hand with them as long as they're in a Chicago Bears uniform. So if we're talking about players that need to have big training camps, Rome Odunze is right there, up there with just about anybody else as well. Next up, Jaquan Brisker. And Jaquan is for a lot of reasons. You look at the health that he had in 2025 season and how, in the 2024 season, and how it just wasn't there. I mean, he didn't play a lot of games. He was on path to have statistically another big year for him, but health is a big part of this in 2025, but he is going to have a really big and strong training camp. Brisker's going to have to show that he's back. Missing the final 12 games of the season, it sucks, right? And, it's going to be something that, Brisker's going to have to really come into this training camp and show that not only is he not timid, but he's ready to pick things up, and he's ready to be a huge contributing factor in Dennis Allen's defense. And he has the capability to do that. He has all the capability of doing that. And we know what Jaquan Brisker is when he's on the football field for the Bears. He's been an impact player at every level, 2 years removed from leading the Chicago Bears in sacks. Dennis Allen, and if Jaquan Brisker can learn the intricacies of Dennis Allen's defense, then the sky should be the limit for him. How Dennis Allen uses defensive backs, Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, they're all going to see amazing, amazing opportunities here under Dennis Allen. And if Brisker can stay on the field for an entire season, it's not just going to be a big year for him. It's going to be a big year for his pockets. It's going to be a big year for the Chicago Bears' future. You need that. And this is a very important, not only season with training camp, but overall season for Jaquan Brisker. And so him having a strong training camp, being able to use that as a launching pad going into the season is going to be one of the most important things that Jaquan Brisker can do this year. And let's see if he can get it done. Then outside of that, let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. Montez Sweat. I mean, listen, Montez is hugely important. The Bears paid him like he's going to be hugely important. And Bears fans who are disappointed by Montez Sweat and the statistical output that he gave last year, it's felt, right? And Sweat is going to have to show himself. If we've added enough on that defensive line to free him up a little bit more, he's going to have to show himself to be that impact guy yet again. Now, I've told you guys, I'm not one to think that it's all comes down to what's in the box score. I think a lot of other things, the intricacies go into how much a player on the defensive side of the ball impacts things. But Montez Sweat has a huge amount of responsibility. Not only is he a leader on that defensive line, but he is the guy. And so, yes, you do need Grady Jarrett and Javon Dexter and Deo Odeyingbo and Andrew Billings. You need those guys to be able to perform enough on the defensive line to free up Montez Sweat more. But you're going to have a Montez Sweat that comes out the gate firing. A strong training camp, him establishing himself as a leader, figuring out that balance. And again, much like everybody on that defensive side of the ball, understanding the intricacies that are going to be there under Dennis Allen's defensive scheme and system, that's going to be a thing. Now, we have heard that he was banged up basically all last year. Okay, great. Have health. Come out of this training camp with really good health so you can get off to a good start. A good start for Montez Sweat is a good start for the Chicago Bears overall. And while we have some questions on that defensive line as far as proving commodities, Montez Sweat is the one that we should be able to rely on to a certain degree. And we got to see if he's going to be able to do that, right? So we'll see. Again, a lot's on Deo and then the opposite side of the defensive, the end to be able to provide, more consistent pressure to free up Montez Sweat more. The interior defensive line is going to be a big part of that. But Montez Sweat is somebody who absolutely has to have a strong training camp and a strong preseason to be able to use that again, as we've said, as a launching pad to go into the season. We want this thing firing on all cylinders as soon as possible. It's going to take a couple of weeks. It may even take to the bye week to really get this thing fully oiled machine, whereas the offense and defense are in really good synergy, but we need to get to that point. If we can't get to that point, it's just going to be ugly. It's just going to be disgusting, and we're going to stumble out the gates again. So we'll see. Montez Sweat, though, is hugely important into all of that as well. And the last player I'm going to bring up here, Ozzy Trapilo. Ozzy Trapilo, I know I've put a lot on Ozzy. Somebody, left a voicemail and we'll play on Friday, in regards to how much I've put on Ozzy Trapilo in his rookie year. And I think that's because of how good he can be. And I don't even mean just as a starter next year for the Bears. Yes, starter is great. If he's able to come in as a starter, that's going to be great. But I think when you look at how much he's impressed in the offseason program, how much he brings as far as what we need on that offensive line, and he's the future there. And so whether he starts this year or not, that if even he doesn't start, he's going to be the swing tackle, which means his ability to play the left and the right side is going to still get him a huge number of snaps. When we talk about the depth, there is a question on the depth of this offensive line. If Ozzy Trapilo isn't a starter, he's one of the best depth pieces that we have on that offensive line right away. Now, I think Braxton can be that too if Braxton would in a different way, if Braxton has to go be on the bench, but Ozzy offers so much. It has to be a big training camp for him. And in a lot of ways, I guess I could mention Braxton Jones here too. As somebody who hasn't been healthy through any of the OTAs or anything up until this point, you want Braxton Jones healthy as well because, like I said with Ozzy, even if Braxton does not start at left tackle, he's still going to have a big role coming off that bench for the Chicago Bears, and you're going to need him to do that. You need depth in your trenches if you want to be a solid team. And so either Ozzy or Braxton are going to be a big part of that depth, depending on who wins that starting left tackle role. So those are the players that I look at and say have to have really strong training camps for the Chicago Bears this year. I think they're all up to the test there. But you guys can let me know how you feel down below. There are other players I could have mentioned. And Kyler Gordon, Terrell Smith, Zay Frazier I could have mentioned, Ruben Hippolyte, right? So let me know your guys' thoughts. What are some of the players that you think have to have a big training camp for the Chicago Bears and big preseason? It kind of goes hand in hand when I talk. Preseason games are part of training camp. That's the way that I look at them. So when I talk about training camp, I'm also talking about what's needed in those preseason games because I think, the preseason and training camp, like I said, they go hand in hand. You need both of those things to work in tandem to really get yourself into a place where you're hitting that launching pad going into next season. So let me know what you guys think on that down below. But with that said, there are always tons of questions around off seasons, around training camps and things like that. And I think there are some pretty big questions for the Chicago Bears at basically each position, especially on the offensive side of the ball, right? We've talked a lot about Caleb. And one of the things with the quarterback and Caleb Williams is how much is Caleb taking a step up? How much growth is Caleb shown from year 1 to year 2? That is the biggest question at that quarterback position, his ability to process, his holding onto the ball too long, attacking the middle of the field. These are all some of the biggest questions there for Caleb Williams heading into his second year that he is going to have to find the answers to sooner rather than later. So Caleb Williams and that quarterback position, that's one of the biggest at that quarterback position. That's one of the biggest questions there. Of course, you can say the backup quarterback between Case Keenum and Tyson Bagent. As far as that, hopefully that doesn't even matter because we're talking about a starting quarterback who's able to play all the games and perform. The next one is that the position group that may have the biggest question is the running back room. DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, Kyle Monangai. How good can this running back room really be? Right. And, I've said it before. Crimson said it. A lot of people said it that an improved offensive line does so much for your running game that it's ridiculous, even if your running back room is a little mediocre. But, how much more above the expectations can they perform as a group and who stands out individually? Is it Roschon, an ability to stay healthy and get more touches? Is it Kyle Monangai as a 7th round pick that has tons? He led the league in rushing from Rutgers, the biggest in rushing. So, there's tons of things there. Yeah, we didn't get the Ashton Genties. We didn't get the Travion Hendersons. So the questions, especially with so much around the Bears, and clearly the Bears front office felt like the running back room needed as much to where they were trying to trade up and get Travion Henderson, right? So because of that, how much does this running back room overall perform next season? How good can they be as a unit? Who stands out individually? Those are some of the biggest questions that I have here. And DeAndre Swift has to worry about himself being a cap casualty potentially next year, especially if a guy like Kyle Monangai or the Bears draft another running back. So that's another question going into the season as well for the running back position. The wide receiver room. Who's the slot? Who stands out as the slot receiver? Of course, common thought is going to say Luther Burden, but Zacchaeus Olamide is not going to make it easy on Luther Burden to come in either, right? How much will Luther Burden play and how big of an impact? The slot receiver is a hugely important role historically under what Ben Johnson does on offense. It just has been. It's been so important to what Ben Johnson's offense has done. The slot receiver has been kind of in a lot of ways the backbone of how creative they can get creatively. So that slot receiver, I trust DJ Moore and Rome Odunze to be good, right? Now, how good they can be, the rush to 1,000, all that type of stuff, that's going to develop over the course of the season. But I think that having a healthy Luther Burden going into training camp, right? Ben Johnson said that he expects Luther Burden to be fully healthy heading into training camp. Having an Olamide Zacchaeus is there as well. And that competition for the slot receiver, I think is more important than what even I've given it credit for. Who stands out of that slot receiver is going to be really important to all of that. We talked yesterday about how Ben Johnson wants to kind of use Luther Burden as a positionless player in a way in certain scenarios. That's going to be important to that. But that slot, that production from the slot is going to be hugely important in that wide receiver room. And so that's one of the biggest questions. How much productivity do you get from the slot? How much consistency do you get from the slot receiver next year? And how many different looks do you have to do? Because I think Colston Loveland is going to line up as a slot receiver sometimes as well. And overall, the productivity from that wide receiver room is, of course, tied to Caleb Williams, but that's really what you're looking at for there. Next up, the tight end position. And that is how well does the 12-man personnel set look? Ben Johnson's revolutionized the 12 personnel. He just has. And getting in a guy like Colston Loveland, when you already have Cole Kmet there, it says exactly how much you're expected to see the 12-man personnel there, right? And, of course, there's some thought, and some Bears fans are going to be looking to see, does Colston Loveland actually outplay Cole Kmet in year one? We'll see what happens there, right? Overall, I'm not worried about the battle between the two. I'm worried about the balance and the balance that it brings to the offense. Everything else will work itself out as the season goes on. I don't think we have to make that a storyline. It'll develop how it develops over the course of the season. But I'm looking at this is how, does Colston Loveland get fully healthy? How early in the training camp? How much does he play in preseason? And then that 12 personnel set, how does that look for the Chicago Bears? How much does that simplify the game for Caleb Williams and turn into a base of the weaponry that we have here for the Chicago Bears? It opens up so much. And Colston Loveland should be on the field day one. He should be getting reps and snaps day one. And so when you pair that with Cole Kmet and what they can do with that tight end position, again, we'll talk about how long Cole Kmet is here on that deal and whatever else. But right now, the Chicago Bears have an opportunity to have weaponry all over. And that's going to be the important part of this. That's going to be the special part in this. And I think that the 12 personnel set, we're going to look back on it and say that it was not only a huge part of what Ben Johnson brought to the Bears, but a huge reason of potentially why our offense could be so dangerous, especially in red zone sets, things like that. I think is going to be important. You need both these guys to stay healthy to do it. You need Colston Loveland to get healthy to do it. But that 12 personnel set and that tight end, how much that revolutionizes that's going to be a big part and things that I look at. Next up, the offensive line. I mean, of course, the biggest question on the offensive line is going to be who wins the starting left tackle position. Braxton Jones, Ozzy Trapilo, Kieran Magaje is still basically in it as well. It seems like most of it has been talked about as far as with with Braxton and Ozzy. But that battle, of course, that's the first thing. Who wins that in training camp? But then after that, it's also this revamped interior offensive line. How much does this improve where the Bears were last year? I just talked about it when I talked about the running back room. Improving the offensive line means that you should get better out of your running back room. But Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, we need all those guys to stay as healthy as possible because, like I said, we got some questions on the depth there on that offensive line. But I think once you get past who the starting left tackle is, now how does this offensive line build chemistry? How do Ozzy Trapilo, Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright learn from Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman? How much does having that better center play actually help the production of your offense as well and stave off some of those injuries? We have lacked so much at the center position for so long that I think people sometimes forget how important that is to what the Chicago Bears have lacked at sometimes and how much that has hurt the Bears. This revamped offensive line is a huge question overall. I can make a whole episode based off the questions that we have here. Depth is another thing, and I'm going to bring that up every time I talk about the offensive line. The question around the depth is going to be a big question here, is that we look at it as well, because I think that, you can see it. Bates is now depth. Bill Murray's now depth. You have those guys. Theo Benedict, I think, is going to play a big part in it. How much is Drew Kramer now being able to focus on the center position? How much better does he play? Luke Newman is another rookie that I think we don't talk enough about, because if he comes in and is ready to contribute his rookie year as a depth piece, that helps a lot as well. And then for the future, learning under Drew Dahlman and stuff like that, the depth is probably the biggest question that I have here for the offensive line. How well and how consistent does that depth perform for the Chicago Bears? Because if you can get consistent depth there, we kind of know what the starters are going to bring, right? Once we have that established, we kind of know on paper and through the history, and because we have veterans on that interior offensive line, we can kind of project how good they're going to be. Like, so they don't have to show it, but we can kind of project it. So the bigger question is going to be now that depth. That is my biggest concern right now with that offensive line. I'm not really worried about who starts between Ozzy and Braxton, because I think either way, it's going to work itself out. How good does that depth perform? Because you need depth. It's your starters. They're not going to be out there every single snap. So no matter how much you've upgraded your starters, if you have a completely weak depth rotation there, it's just going to get right back to being ugly for you. And that's what we're trying to avoid here with the Chicago Bears, is having that ugly performance on that offensive line, and the depth is going to be a really big, important part of that. But overall, like between the weapons, the expectations of Caleb Williams coming into this year, the running back room, the offensive line, we have a lot of what Ben Johnson wants. The question now is, how well do these players perform in that system under Ben Johnson? That is the biggest question here. And that's one that we don't have the answer for yet, and we won't have until they're on the football field, taking snaps and getting it done. And hopefully we see that sooner rather than later, because I tell you what, there's a lot of reason to be excited at the start of training camp. We're only a couple of weeks away from actual preseason games. We're getting closer and closer to football, people. Can you feel it? Can you smell it? I hope you can, because football fields sometimes stink. But we're getting closer and closer there. I can't wait to be talking about actual football. C-Dub's going to be back on the live calls. You already know that's an experience. So stay in tune with us, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following us at Chi Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, Chi-Town up, but bear down. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.